Our last speaker today is Kate Parker, who's the Team Leader Sustainable Materials at Scion. Please help join with me in welcoming Kate to the stage.
Thank you. The great thing about being last is it's all been said. It's just a test of how well you've listened. All right. So yes, ko Kate Parker tōku ingoa. I am a mother. Those are my two boys there, aged 12 and 16. They are giants. And I'm also a scientist. So those pictures just going down, there's me on top of an industrial composting site looking for my industrially compostable samples that are somewhere in there. It took me 2 days, but we did find them. I spent many years coming up developing these bioplastic alternatives to expanded polystyrene, and I also dabble in microplastics as well. It's just a really good excuse to spend a day at a beach on the pretense of looking for microplastics. And I lead the packaging research that's undertaken at Scion. So this is developing and testing fibre packaging, plastic packaging, bioplastic packaging. Our digital packaging is sensors for traceability as well as food quality monitoring. And then of course across all of that is compliance, really important, our food contact compliance as well as end-of-life compliance. So I don't need to tell you all how important packaging is, especially for food, but I do have to put up the highly contentious plastic-covered cucumber. We all know why we have it. It increases the shelf life of the cucumber at least double of what it would normally be by reducing the water loss out of the cucumber. So it's all about reducing food waste. The broccoli one is a little bit different. Here we're preventing the phytochemicals coming out of the broccoli. These are the point of eating broccoli, not because we like the taste. So the ones that are not covered in plastic have 80% less of these phytochemicals in them. But of course, as we know, plastic or packaging is blamed for a lot of the plastic pollution that we see. And even if your packaging has been deemed food safe or past food contact compliance, as we're learning more, we're discovering that actually it can contaminate our food a little bit. So I'm just going to take off on a little tangent here and talk about microplastics. So I spend a lot of my life telling people that tea bags are not made of paper, as people commonly believe. They are actually made of plastic. If they're made of paper, they'll disintegrate in your cup of tea. We've put them under the FTIR, and we see they're predominantly made of polyethylene, and as a result, in every cup of tea you drink, you are having millions, if not billions, of microplastics in there from your tea bag. Another example is abrasive foods. This one's come in the literature recently. Rice is the example that's packaged in plastic packaging. As it's transported along the food chain, or the supply chain, sorry, the rice is rubbing the plastic and causing these microplastics. And the literature is in debate on whether actually you do wash these microplastics off before you cook them when you're rinsing your rice or not. And then an issue with this is when you're now forming these small microplastics, you're allowing a surface for these additives that are in the plastic to be able to come out. So now things that were largely locked up in the plastic packaging before, the endocrine disruptors and those sorts of things are now being able to come out and into your food. But before we blame packaging for this, I've got to say that there's a lot of microplastics in your food before it even gets close to packaging, so please don't blame the packaging. And then Jeff has already talked about the PFAS, which is commonly used as a barrier coating for fibre packaging. Okay, so this is a question that I put to people a lot because they come to me and they say, Kate, we want more sustainable packaging. And I say to them, what does that mean to you? Because it can mean all sorts of different things to different people. Does it mean your packaging is bio-derived? Does it mean that it's biodegradable at end of life? Think about where your consumer is. If lightweighting is really important because a lot of our export markets are so far away, that's important. Or what infrastructure does that region have where your packaging will end up? So all of these are really important. And then, of course, there's the performance criteria. Emily talked about them before, which are non-negotiable. And in this industry, number one is always food contact compliance. Number two is usually cost, which is not far behind. So this is probably the one slide, if you're going to look at any of my slides, that summarises the important things I have to say. So these are the sustainable packaging trends for 2024, according to the recent literature. And there's 6 of them listed there. The first one, Emily, I think, covered really well. There's a big drive for recycled plastic, so I'm not going to go and talk about that anymore. The next one, bioplastics. Now, bioplastics are definitely on the rise. The graph there shows that there's growth in bioplastic production, but even so, this is only 1% roughly of all the plastics that are used in the world. So it's still tiny, tiny, and there's a lot of reasons for that, and I'll go into those a little bit more in a minute. Paper and glass are making a huge comeback, and this is really consumer driven. People have this perception that paper and glass are much better for the environment than plastic, and this is not strictly true. Paper I'll talk about more, but glass, I've just got to say, it's a highly intensive process to produce glass. It's really heavy, so you've got to think of your transportation costs. But on the plus for food, if it's properly sterile, it is premium for food safety. It is an inert material that will not contaminate your food product. Reusables and refillables. I'm old enough to remember glass milk bottles, glass beer bottles that came in crates. So they have been around. Nowadays, the most often one is the coffee cup, probably, that you take in to refill. And there are issues in the food space around these, largely around food safety. Do you clean them well enough? The onus largely is on the consumer. But there are some systems where you take back products and they'll be sterilised for you before they're refilled. Minimalism is another one. How often do you get this big box delivered to your house and you open it up and it's got all this void space or this extra packaging in there to hold this little thing that you've brought from somewhere? So there's a big focus on making sure the right size packaging for the product that's being put into it. The example that I've got up there on the screen of the grapes in the cardboard box is not great, so we're not going to debate that one, but it's a good visual to make you think about what exactly the idea is behind this one. And then the last one is your smart label technology to improve sustainability, so I'll talk about this a little bit more as well. So first of all, plastics and bioplastics. I love this picture here. This was COVID times, boom time for plastic packaging if you could get your hands on it right. Recycled plastics, as I said, I think Emily's covered this really well, but I will say the bit that sort of was missed was there's a big drive towards monomaterials. So you saw Emily's pouch that had many different layers in it, which makes it really, really, really hard to recycle through mechanical recycling, and that's why we had such problems with our flexibles in this country. So there is a drive to how can we make each product, packaging product out of one material. The example there of the bottles along the bottom, so what people have done in this space is they've tried to use a label that's the same polymer as the bottle itself, so the whole lot can be recycled as one. But this is actually not an example of that. This is an example of design for recycling. So what they've done here is used a glue on their label, which makes it really easy to detach when they're about to recycle it, so then they can easily remove that contamination from the product that they need to recycle. Also, I was going to say there's other contaminants in there. You're probably all aware that the Sprite bottle for many years has been green and it's recently gone clear, and this is a great example of being able to increase its recyclability because now it doesn't have that green contaminant in there that was then going to contaminate the rest of that recycle stream. So bioplastics. So there's, just to be clear on definitions, probably some of you have heard me say this before, but bioplastic it's derived from plant-based, it is biodegradable at end of life, even though it's still made from oil, or it can be both. So polyethylene, for example, traditionally made from oil, but now they can make it from a plant-based source, so it's called bio-PE. This area of bioplastics is probably the biggest growth area. Rachel might correct me on this, but this one here, you're making what's known as a traditional plastic, so it behaves exactly like a traditional plastic, and it won't be biodegradable at end of life. The problem with biodegradables is they do tend to be a poor performer. There are all sorts of issues with them, which I can go to later if you want to talk about them, which is why there's not, it's slow to be taken up, these, but I just want to put these two, while I'm up here on my soapbox, these two definitions. Biodegradable does mean it will break down, but it's no set time frame. So it can be 50 years, it can be 100 years, but yes, it will still break down. So when you see the term compostable, that means it will be broken down, but it's always within a certain time frame. There's other conditions as well, that's part of that, the temperature and these sorts of things, but it is within a certain time frame. So you're looking for compostable on your packaging if you want something to disappear. And there is a place for compostable packaging. Usually when it's highly contaminated, food is a good example because you don't want to clean all the food off your compostable waste. So that is a place that it would have a good use, often within events and those sorts of things that are quite controlled. If you go to some sort of music event and then all the packaging can be contained with it, and it is very tight control of what's in there and what's not in there. The example down the bottom I've shown there is what I think is a bad example of compostable packaging. So this is a muesli bar essentially, which is supposed to be home compostable, the packaging. So how often do you eat a muesli bar at home, right? You usually grab it, you're taking it with you, it's on the run. You're in a place where there is no home composting facility, and as well as that, muesli bars are actually really clean, I'm going to say. So they don't contaminate the packaging much, so you've got a really clean waste stream that comes out of that, which could probably be used or recycled better. The biggest problem with fibre, in terms of performance, is it's not plastic. So, so people come to me all the time and they say, we want fibre, but we want it to be moisture barrier and grease barrier and gas barrier. We'd like it to be strong, we'd like it to be durable, and if you can really manage it, Kate, we'd really like it to be transparent because people really like to be able to see their product before they open it. And as I said, this is really consumer-driven as well because people really think that paper is a lot better than plastic in many applications. So there are applications, these are some real-life applications where changes are being made. So the first one there, the Barilla, I think they're an Italian pasta company. They used to make their packaging for their pasta that had that little window in it, which made it actually almost impossible to recycle as is. You had to sort of pull it apart into the different pieces before you could recycle each piece differently. But as I said, consumers really like to see their products. So they did a huge education piece for the consumers and said, look, you can't see it anymore. It's the same stuff. Just trust us. From now on, we're going to have the boxes without the window. And it was successful in the end, but it was a huge marketing campaign for them. But it made it now a lot more recyclable at end of life. So it's another drive for the mono material, if you like, so just using one product in your packaging. The other one I will talk about is the fibre bottle. There's a lot of talk about the fibre bottle. I've never actually seen one in real life myself. I obviously need to go to Carlsberg. But obviously a fibre bottle, as it is, in its pure form, if you like, there's no way it's going to hold beer. So it does need to have some sort of barrier in there. And the example there of the Pabeco bottle, which stands for Paper Bottle Company, which is a Danish company. They've just got a plastic liner inside there to be able to hold the liquid in there. So this is an advantage because you can use a lot less plastic in there because it's really thin because the fibre bottle itself is holding the form of the bladder essentially, and you can separate them at the end of life to be able to have those two separate waste streams. So a couple of examples of reusable and refillables. Perhaps I'll start with the Go Unpacked, which is a UK-based initiative, the Refill Coalition. I think of it a lot like Pack and Save, Bin In really. They've got everything in the big bulk boxes in there. You take your containers in. You can take in any container, they just weigh them beforehand, you fill them up and then put your lid on and off you go and pay for what you've taken. Again, as I said before, this is really important for you to make sure that your container is clean before it goes in there to avoid any contamination of your food. And then the other example I've shown there, again, I don't know if any of you came across it. This is a New Zealand company with these takeaway coffee cups. So essentially they don't say they're a packaging company or any of these things, they say they're a technology platform. So what that means is there's an app on your phone. When you pick up the coffee cup, you check it out, essentially like a library book. It's on your phone, it says this is when it's due back in, and when you go in, you take it back in, they'll take it and clean it, and then you can get a new one and pick it up. I guess the other thing to say about this is, of course, you have to, again, on the consumer, you have to remember to take them with you. It's like your plastic bags or your recyclable bags at the supermarket. You have to always be actively conscious about it. And lastly, I'm looking at Phil, the smart label technology. This is the last example I was going to give. So the top one there, traditionally on packaging, you've had all sorts of information on there, and it's really hard for you to figure out how to recycle your product at the end of life or any of those bits of information you want to get off your packaging. So there's a big drive at the moment towards QR codes. I don't know how well it's going to take up, but using QR codes because you can put so much information in there. And when you use your QR code, you can scan it, and it tells you this is how you recycle it, this is all the good food that's in it, this is all the bad food that's in it, all that sort of information. Because they assume that everybody's carrying their smartphone and can just scan things everywhere. The one down the bottom is actually an example from an Italian company again, who wanted to reduce the number of labels they print for their wine because they never knew how much wine they were going to get out of every season, and they found they were making way too many labels for the 2024 season, and they were having to waste a lot of them. As well as that, they have to have lots of different labels for lots of different markets, because in Europe, as we've heard, there's 24 something different languages. So what they've started trying, I'm sure it's not going to look like this because it's ugly, but they're putting a QR code on their wine bottles, and then when you buy your wine, you just scan it, and your phone will automatically figure out what country you're in, so what language you need to be in. It'll give you all the information about it in your own language, and then also, again, how to recycle and those sorts of things for the end of life. So that's it. We do need packaging, and it's not all bad. What I haven't really talked about, but Rachel talked about a little bit, is we do need more regulation, we need more harmonisation, we need everything to be consistent so people can easily look at things and figure out what they're going to do with it, when they've got it, when they're finished with it, the common language, the common labels, all these sorts of things, and then of course the infrastructure in place to be able to deal with it. The big drivers, globally, we still want recyclability over compostability. But again, I think everything has its place. Recycling, chemical recycling, mechanical recycling, all these different things are going to come together and make it happen. And then the emerging trends, as I've talked about, is the monomaterials, big drive toward fibre, and then redesigning our product. That's me.